Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the frosty, fish-scented world of a Viking fisherman. You're not going raiding, you're not discovering Greenland, and you're definitely not pillaging a monastery. No pure going to work, but don't worry, it's just fishing. Slow, chilly, and very, very damp fishing. You'll wake up in a longhouse where everyone smells like smoked herring and goat. Dress yourself in hand-me-down wool that's never been properly dry, and head out into a fjord that doesn't care how tired you are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love hearing from you all around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you stir before the sun, or maybe the sun just forgot to show up. It's hard to tell. Outside, the world is grey and cold. Inside the longhouse, it's slightly warmer and just as grey. Smoke from last night's fire curls lazily through the rafters, making your eyes sting. Someone's snoring in the corner like they're fighting a sea monster in their dreams. And your foot is, unfortunately, wet. You sit up and realize your boot has a leak. Again, the floor is damp from melting frost, and your boots, meticulously stuffed with hay last night, have betrayed you. Welcome to Viking mornings, a blend of hypothermia, mild smoke inhalation, and communal flatulence. You pull on a thick wool tunic that smells like wet dog and old salt. Not because it is a dog, but because it's been through at least 3 fishing seasons and possibly a battle. You wrap a belt around your waist, tie a knife to it mostly for show, since you'll be using your hands for everything anyway, and look for your gloves. You find one, the other. The goat is sleeping on it, of course. Mainstream historians agree that Viking longhouses were designed for maximum communal living and minimum privacy. Everyone from your second cousin to that one guy who just never left sleeps in one large room. Fires burn down the middle, with raised platforms along the sides for sleeping. It's warm, sure, but also crowded, noisy, and forever smoky. Historians still argue whether ventilation holes actually worked or just gave the smoke more options. You rise, stretch your back with a series of complaints, and nearly trip over a small child who's either asleep or pretending to be. You step around them, stub your toe on a storage chest, and finally shuffle toward the exit where the real cold awaits. The door creaks open, and a gust of wind introduces itself to your eyebrows. Frost covers the ground, and mist rolls in from the fjord. Like a lazy sea dragon, you can see your breath, and the sky hasn't committed to being daylight yet. In the distance, boats bob in place, tied to shore or anchored by stubborn hope outside. Your fishing gear waits in a haphazard pile, nets made from flax or sometimes nettle fiber, hand-tied with more patience than you have this morning. You grab the bundle, sling it over your shoulder, and squint toward the goat, who seems to be judging your life choices. Again, quirky fact. Some Viking fishermen kept goats or chickens on their boats not just for food, but for company and pest control, of course. It's also possible they were just bad at saying no. You make your way toward the boat, feet crunching over frost-hardened soil, ears catching the faint sounds of other early risers. Somewhere, someone is already arguing, probably about fish, or about whose turn it is to patch the net, which will never be yours if you can help it. As you walk, you pass small sheds where fish are salted, cured, and hung to dry into shacks that always smell like the ghosts of 1,000 herring. The air is rich with brine and firewood, and a little hint of last night's fish stew. Down by the water, your crewmates are already gathered. There's Gunnar, who once claimed to have seen a sea serpent near Orkney. No one believes him, but we all keep a polite silence. There's Bjorn, who brings the goat and insists it brings him luck. And then there's you, still wondering if that sock you lost last week drifted out to sea. The boat is long and narrow, carved from pine, patched with tar, and covered in what might be yesterday's breakfast. You load your nets, grab a wooden oar, and settle in for what you know will be a very long, very cold morning. As the first row of oar strokes cuts through the water, the fjord responds with a low slap against the hull. The rhythm begins: pull, splash, breath, grumble. You pass rocky cliffs dotted with scrubby trees. Seabirds circling above like they know you're not going to catch much today. Your breath fogs in the air. Your gloves are already damp, and your nose is making decisions without you. But the boat rocks gently. The water reflects the first hints of light, and for a moment, it's not so bad. Just you, the sea, and the long, steady rhythm of old wooden oars. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen primarily used handlines or nets, though archaeological finds suggest both were common. Nets required more setup and more rowing, back and forth, but they allowed for larger hauls. On the downside, they also tangled like a squirrel in a sweater as you row into deeper water. The village behind you disappears into the mist. The goat bleats, the sky stays grey, and your boots are still wet. The boat rocks gently as the shore slips further into fog, replaced by the flat, cold sprawl of the fjord. There's a silence here, broken only by the creak of oars and the occasional grunt from your fellow rowers. Everyone's still too sleepy or too resigned to talk. You've all done this 100 times. There's nothing new to say, except, of course, for the goat. Bjorn brought it again. He always brings it. Its name changes weekly today. It's apparently Olaf, the fish blessed. The goat stands in the bow like it owns the boat, staring at the horizon with what you can only assume is existential dread. Or maybe it's seasick. No one knows what goes on in a goat's mind. You reach your usual spot, shallow pocket in the fjord where the current slows and the fish sometimes gather if you're lucky. And since luck is rarely in good supply, you also bring bait. You pull out a small pail of chopped mussels and yesterday's leftovers, none of which smell like victory. While you and the crew prep the nets, your fingers already numb, Bjorn mutters about sea spirits. He always does this, in that half-sea way that lets him laugh it off if you mock him. He claims the spirits don't like it when you whistle before casting your net. He also claims they once braided his hair while he slept. You're not sure what's more disturbing, the story, or the fact that someone believes he actually combs his hair. Still, part of you listens, not because you believe it, but because life out here is unpredictable. One moment the water is glass, the next it's flipping your boat like it found you annoying. Quirky tidbit: Viking fishermen often carved protective runes into their oars, or painted stylized eyes on the bows of their boats, hoping to ward off sea monsters, spirits, or just plain bad luck. You've got a crude rune scratched into your net. Wait, it may just be an old love letter. But hey, whatever helps. You lower the net slowly, one icy knot at a time, teeth clenching each time the rope slips in your fingers. The chill bites through your gloves, and it's not even the coldest part of the year. That's when the fjord starts to steam like soup from the contrast of water and air, and your snot freezes into tiny icicles. As the net sinks, so does your optimism. Fish don't care that you're tired. Fish don't care that your boots leak. Fish have their own schedules, and apparently, their sleeping in Gonna finally speaks, leaning on his, or like a philosopher, about to say something profound. I once caught a cod bigger than my leg, he mutters. Everyone nods. No one believes him, not because it's impossible cod can get weirdly big, but because Gunnar lies for sport. Historians still argue whether Viking fishermen exaggerated their catches or if their fish really were just that massive. Personally, you think it's 30% skill, 20% luck, and 50% creative storytelling. The goat sneezes dramatically. The boat lurches slightly. Suddenly, a seagull dive bombs the water next to you, plucking out a wriggling fish in a flash of white feathers and salty arrogance. It's a reminder that nature is always faster, more efficient, and significantly better at fishing than you. Maybe we should train birds, you say. Bjorn narrows his eyes. Birds can't bless the nets, he replies. You don't argue. You've learned not to fight theology before breakfast. The cold intensifies. Your jaw aches from clenching. Your shoulders are stiff from rowing, and the fog hasn't lifted an inch. It curls around the boat like an indecisive ghost, muting the horizon and making you question whether you're drifting in circles. You check the net. Nothing yet. Just a few strands of seaweed and what might be someone's sock. You're not sure how it got there, but you briefly consider keeping it. It might be drier than your current pair. As you wait, you lean back and let your fingers rest. There's a particular kind of tired that seeps into your bones after rowing in wet wool. It's not dramatic. It just settles in, like an old dog curling up in your ribs. You look up at the sky, which still hasn't chosen a color. It's a blank, wet sheet of gray. It might stay that way all day. Mainstream sources note that while Viking raiders get all the headlines, fishing was the true lifeblood of many coastal settlements. Cod, herring, and flatfish were staples, not just for food, but also for trade dried. And salted, they could last for months and journey far inland. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept you alive. The net tugs slightly. You sit up. Everyone leans in. For a moment, the boat goes quiet, except for the goat, who starts chewing a piece of rope in solidarity. You haul in the net. Water drips from the lines, splashing back into the fjord with tired slaps. It's heavier than before, just enough to give you hope. You squint. A few silver shapes gleam through the mesh. Herring, not many, but enough for breakfast and maybe trade. Bjorn mutters, a thank you to the sea spirits. You don't say anything, but you mentally apologize for whistling earlier. As the catch flops in the bottom of the boat, the crew relaxes slightly, still cold, still damp. But now you've got proof the day isn't a total loss. Even the goat looks pleased, or at least confused in a new way. You sit back, stretch your aching arms, and try not to think about how many more hours this will go on. The sea is wide, the nets are old, and your toes are probably permanently pruny, but for now, there are fish in the boat and no storms on the horizon. You'll take it. With a modest pile of herring flopping about at your feet and sea mist still curling round the boat like a shy cat, you take a moment to sit back and just breathe. The kind of breath that fogs up in front of your face before vanishing, like everything else out here. The fjord feels like a world apart. No gossip, no chores, no yelling children. Just the occasional goat sneeze and the steady lap of cold water against your hull. You're not done for the day, not even close. The herring are just the appetizer. What you're really hoping for now is codfish, meaty, trade-worthy cod, or maybe a flatfish if the sea is feeling generous. The kind of fish that gets you compliments in the longhouse, maybe even earns you a seat near the fire instead of next to the guy who won't stop talking about his mysterious rash dot. As you reset the net, you look at your hands' cracked knuckles, dirt under the nails, and a distinct smell of something fish adjacent that never really goes away. You can scrub with ash, sand, even the sour-smelling lichen someone swore was cleansing, but the smell always lingers. It's not a bad smell, it just announces you. You're a Viking fisherman, and you smell like it. You cast the net again with a satisfying splash and let it sink. The silence settles back in, heavy and comfortable like an old wool blanket. You could almost fall asleep, if not for the goat nibbling the end of your braid. "Stop it, Olaf," you mutter. The goat blinks. You blink back. This is the closest thing you've had to a spiritual connection in weeks. Your crewmates start humming a low tune, one of those ancient rowing songs with more vowels than you remember lyrics. You join in any way it passes the time and helps. Your arms forget how tired they are. Historians still argue whether these work chants were formal compositions or improvised on the spot, but either way, they stick, like barnacles, or Bjorn's endless stories. Speaking of Bjorn, he points out across the water at what he claims is a rival fisherman's boat. He squints dramatically. "That's Thorstein's rig," he says, "always stealing our best spots." You follow his gaze. It's a log with a bird on it. You say nothing. Quirky fact: in some fishing villages, subtle boat wars happened, not full-on Viking brawls, but silent competitions over the best spots. People marked their territory with carved driftwood, totems, or even curses etched into nearby stones. You once found a stone near the shore with a rune that just said, "Back off, Hrothgar." You respect that energy. You check the net again. The weight's shifted. Something's in there, with careful fingers, partly because the rope's slippery, mostly because you're too tired to do anything quickly. You begin hauling. This time, the net comes up heavy, and your biceps scream in betrayal. You grunt, pull, and finally catch a glimpse of wriggling shapes through the mesh. Cod, not giants, but thick and solid. Good fish, trade fish, fire seat fish. The crew perks up, even the goat wags its tail. Or maybe that's just the breeze. Either way, morale improves. Gunnar claps you on the back, which nearly sends you face first into the fjord. You consider pushing him in as revenge, but decide it's too cold for murder. Mainstream historians agree that cod was a backbone of the Viking economy, dried, salted, and shipped across Europe. It was one of the earliest forms of fish-based currency, if you will. You can't eat silver, after all, but a good chunk of dried cod. That gets you firewood, new boots, or maybe even a goat that doesn't chew hair as you sort the catch, separating the herring from the cod and throwing the occasional seaweed tangle overboard. You notice something shiny in the net. You pick it up, a bronze brooch, old and weathered, possibly dropped by another fisherman or washed up from who-knows-where. It's round, patterned like waves, and oddly warm to the touch. Bjorn leans in. "It's a sign," he whispers. "The sea is watching." You sigh. The sea should mind its own business. Still, you tuck the brooch into your belt pouch. Not because you believe in omens, but because, well, what else are you going to do? Throw it back and insult Poseidon. As you finish organizing the catch, the mist finally begins to thin, just a little. A shy reveal of the mountains in the distance, jagged and snow-laced, watching silently like ancient giants. The sunlight, what little there is, glints on the water, and for a moment the fjord looks almost inviting. You take out your skin of watered-down ale and pass it around. Everyone takes a swig, including Gunnar, who claims he once fermented an entire barrel inside a hollowed-out whale. No one asks follow-up questions. The boat sits steady now, anchored loosely in place, while you debate whether to haul in one more net or start heading back. There's no real clock out here, just the ache in your shoulders and the angle of the light. But your gut says you've got maybe another hour before the wind picks up and the fjord stops playing nice. You bait one last net and lower it in with something resembling hope. Meanwhile, Bjorn sings an off-key lullaby to the goat. You pretend not to hear. The water around your boat is quiet again, broken only by the distant caw of a gull and the occasional splash as something unseen jumps or falls into the fjord. The morning is passing slowly, in that sleepy, stretched-out way only fishermen understand. 1 minute you're tying a knot, the next you've been staring into the fog for 20 minutes, thinking about smoked turnips and whether goats understand sarcasm. The last net bobs gently below the surface. It hasn't tugged yet, but you're content to wait. The truth is, you're in no rush, because heading back means rowing. And rowing means more cold water seeping into the seams of your tunic. So, for now, you let the net drift and savor this small piece. In a world where most work involves axes or angry farm animals, fishing is, well, not relaxing, but less likely to involve screaming. Gunnar breaks the silence by trying to tell a joke. Something about a monk, a seal, and an eel. With too many teeth. You can't follow the punchline, and neither can he, but the boat rocks gently with the shared chuckle. Humor keeps you warm, even when your fingers can't. Mainstream fact of the day: Viking fishing wasn't just men in boats. Women played a huge role in preserving and preparing the catch, gutting, drying, salting, and smoking the fish for storage and trade. Whole family units worked together, especially in coastal villages where fish meant survival. The daily work was communal, rhythmic, and, let's be honest, a bit gross. Still, you miss that warmth. The hearth, the smell of juniper smoke curling up from the fire pit. Your partner's predictable complaint about your fishy socks. The domestic side of Viking life wasn't exactly cozy, but it had its comforts. Like flatbread fried in bear fat. Or that one carved stool that didn't wobble. Back in the boat, you stretch your legs carefully, trying not to bump the goat, who has finally curled into a sleepy loaf at the prow. Bjorn gently pats its head like it's a sacred relic. You're not sure what religion this is, but you respect the commitment. Suddenly, you feel a shift, a distinct tug on the line. Not a nibble, a real pull. You snap upright, so do the others. No jokes now. You lean in, hands gripping the slick rope, and begin to haul it in. It's heavier than expected. A good sign, or a sea monster. Possibly both. Bit by bit, the net rises, shimmering with motion beneath the surface. Water pours off the mesh in rivulets as the shape emerges, more cod, thick and wriggling. One of them might actually be longer than Gunnar's forearm, which means he now has to find a new lie. And there's something else. Stuck in the net, tangled near the bottom, is what looks like a carved wooden object. You pull it loose, its a tiny, water-worn figurine of a woman, long hair, arms outstretched, maybe a goddess, maybe just a decorative piece someone dropped overboard 100 years ago. Either way, it's eerie in that beautiful, unsettling way old things are. Bjorn stares at it. That's Ran, he says quietly. The sea goddess. Or someone's lost doll. Gunnar mutters. Historians still debate whether these sea figurines were worshipped or simply folk tokens, charm or coincidence. Maybe both. Either way, it's going on the shelf back home, right next to the possibly cursed whale tooth and the seashell that looks like a face. With the fish secured and your weird nautical artifact safely pocketed, it's finally time to turn back. Not because you want to, but because the wind is starting to shift. You feel it at the base of your skull first, like an ancient warning. That subtle, sharp bite that says the fjord is about to change moods. You and the crew prepare to row back. Oars are reset. Sore shoulders groan. Even the goat sighs. As you begin the slow rhythm of rowing, the water glides past like oil. Smooth, but dark. Beneath it, you know, are rocks sharp enough to split a Holland shipwrecks old enough to have names. The fjord remembers everything. Quirky fact, Viking fishermen often named their boats. Sometimes after gods, sometimes after girlfriends, sometimes after insults. Your boat is called Bragger's Beard, for reasons lost to time. Probably a bet. The row home begins in near silence, save for the splash of oars and the occasional grunt of exertion. The fog has mostly cleared now, and the mountains rise like walls of grey-blue stone on either side of you, ancient and disapproving. You row and row and row. You begin to lose feeling in your arms. Around the same time, your rear end goes completely numb on the hard wooden plank. Somewhere behind you, Bjorn starts humming again. It's off-key, but weirdly comforting. You pass. A few seabirds bobbing on the water. They eye your catch enviously, but wisely keep their distance. Except one, who hovers overhead and lets loose a splash of something warm and regrettable on your hood. You don't curse. You just sigh and row harder. By the time you glimpse the distant outline of your village smoke from hearth fires curling into the air, rooftops huddled like gossiping hens, you feel a strange combination of exhaustion and satisfaction. You didn't strike gold. You didn't uncover Atlantis. But you've got fish, a mysterious statue, and most of your fingers still attached. That's a good day in the Viking world. The shore grows closer. Home is waiting. The boat bumps gently against the pebbled shoreline with a sound that somehow manages to be both comforting and vaguely insulting. Like a tired old man mumbling, "Took you long enough." The crew disembarks with all the grace of cold, wet sacks being flung onto the rocks. You stretch your legs and immediately regret it. Your knees audibly protest, sounding like a wooden door in need of oiling. The goat leaps out last, triumphant, as if it had personally caught every fish in the boat. Your village unfolds before you in its usual haphazard charm, turf-roofed, longhouses leaning slightly askew, smoke lazily curling from Holland roof, chimneys, chickens darting between puddles like tiny, judgmental watchdogs. Children run past, shrieking, their faces painted with soot and possibly jam. It's hard to tell. Someone's shouting about missing socks. A dog is chasing a wheel. A wheel is chasing another dog. It's a lively place, but before you can think about rest, there's work to be done. The fish need to be offloaded and cleaned. You and the crew haul the nets and crates up to the fish drying racks. passing neighbors who nod in that understated Viking way that somehow means, well done. You smell like low tide, and don't forget to return my axle. At once, the racks stand tall near the shore, wooden frames hung with hooks and lines, waiting for your catch to begin its transformation from slimy to edible. You get to work gutting the fish, slipping into the rhythm of it. Slice, scoop, rinse, hang. Slice, scoop, rinse, hang. It's a little gross, yes. Your fingers are red and your sleeves are wet, but there's something weirdly satisfying about it. Like folding laundry if laundry occasionally tried to slap you. Mainstream historical fact: Viking communities relied heavily on dried fish, particularly stockfish. Air-dried cod as a major food source and trade item. It kept for months, sometimes years, and was as common in Viking pantries as honey or barley. Some was even shipped as far as Byzantium, where it was considered exotic like Viking beef jerky, but less appealing. You work beside Freydis, one of the sharpest fishwives in the village. She greets you with a grunt and hands you a sharper knife, clearly unimpressed by your dull blade and slightly worse technique. She's been doing this since before you could walk and takes her fish seriously. Her scarf is tied in a no-nonsense knot, and her hands move like poetry grism. Efficient poetry. She eyes the brooch you found in the net. That's Ran, she mutters, just like Bjorn did. Or her daughter, keep it dry and don't let it face west. You nod solemnly, got it. No west-facing sea goddess figurines. Classic mistake. Quirky detail. Some Viking coastal families believed in fish spirits or guardian entities that lived in the racks themselves. Small offerings, shells, feathers, or drops of alewort, sometimes placed near the racks to ensure a good curing season. Your cousin once tried offering his toenail clippings. The fish turned green. Lesson learned. You move down the rack, hanging the last of your cod while listening to the sounds of daily life echoing through the village. Someone sharpening a blade, a distant lullaby, the thump-thump of a loom being worked somewhere. It's all part of the soundtrack. Nearby, Bjorn is telling a group of kids a wildly inaccurate story about how he once fished a sword out of a whale's mouth. The kids are wide-eyed. You consider correcting him, but honestly, he's earned it. You look over the racks, satisfied with your contribution. The fish dangle like strange, scaly wind chimes, already stiffening in the cold breeze. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which is now an abstract painting of fish guts and seawater, and take a deep breath. The salty air fills your lungs. You swear you can taste the morning still clinging to it. Historians still argue whether the drying racks were communal property or owned by individual families. Some sagas describe vicious feuds over racked placement hole, family lines torn apart over who got the sunniest patch of drying ground. You wouldn't be surprised. Vikings weren't exactly famous for subtle conflict resolution. You wander over to the longhouse, feeling every step in your thighs now. A few children wave. One of them throws a clump of snow at you, misses, and falls over. You salute their effort. As you pass the smithy, the blacksmith nods without looking up. He's focused on a bit of horseshoe the size of a dinner plate. You try not to trip over the dogs lounging near the door, especially the one that looks like it's dreaming of vengeance. Finally, you reach your longhouse. It's warm inside and dim, lit by the golden flicker of an oil lamp. The fire pit glows in the center, and someone's left a hunk of bread near the coals to toast. You swipe it, of course. You've earned it. You peel off your outer layer, wet wool, stiff leather, and the kind of damp that somehow reaches your soul and settle onto the nearest fur-covered bench. Your back cracks like a frozen tree. You chew your bread. It tastes vaguely of smoke, salt, and satisfaction. The goat has followed you home. It stares at you from the doorway like it's waiting for rent. You sigh, fine, but you're sleeping on the floor. The goat winks or blinks. You're too tired to tell. The longhouse around you breathes with quiet life, creaking as it adjusts to the dropping afternoon temperatures. Smoke from the central hearth curls upward, escaping through the smoke hole in lazy swells. The light inside is dim, the way your eyes like it after hours of squinting at water and fish guts. You settle deeper into your bench, legs stretched out, tunic steaming faintly as it dries beside the fire. Your partner, always 5 steps ahead of your appetite, sets a clay bowl in front of you. Fish stew, naturally, with barley and onions. Not your favorite, but after today's haul, it tastes like a king's ransom. You scoop it up with a piece of slightly burnt flatbread, ignoring the faint crunch that might be sand or bone. You're too tired to care. Caught anything strange? They ask, nodding toward your belt, where the figurine still hangs by a loop of sinew. You hold it up. Ran, or one of her sisters, or someone's very dramatic spoon. They squint. Well, don't let it curse the soup. You smile, tucking it back in your pouch like a talisman or a mild threat. Either works in Viking culture once the meal is done. You get to work preparing some of the fresh fish for salting. Salted fish is the village's best bet during the harshest months. You slice open the bellies with a steady rhythm, layering each one in a wooden trough filled with crystalline flakes harvested from coastal pans. Your hands are wrinkled and pale by now, stiff from both cold and repetition. Mainstream fact: Viking preservation methods were sophisticated for the time. They used salt curing, smoking, and fermentation, particularly in pits or barrels, to stretch food supplies through the lean seasons. Salt itself was valuable, sometimes imported or traded for from salt springs inland. You hum an old tune under your breath as you work. It's one of those inherited songs whose words don't quite make sense anymore. Something about a bear and a stolen boot. But it helps you keep time. Across the longhouse, your partner sharpens a bone needle with the same absent focus. Domesticity in the Viking Age wasn't separate from survival, it was survival. Needle and net, blade and bowl. There's a knockwell, more like a thud, of something heavy against the door. Probably Bjorn. You open it to find him holding up a string of eels, like a man offering gold necklaces. Look what slithered into the trapline, he says, far too proud. Thought you could smoke a few for me. You take them wordlessly, already imagining your fingers stinking for the next week. But you agree it's a good trade. Smoked eel lasts forever and makes excellent winter rations, or enemy repellent. Quirky fact: in some Norse fishing communities, eel oil was used to waterproof boots or even smeared on hair as a styling aid. The smell was atrocious, but apparently it gave the right windswept berserker chic. Bjorn, naturally, tried it once. The goats avoided him for weeks. You step outside again as the sun dips low behind the fjord's jagged ridgeline. The sky bleeds amber and violet. In the distance, the water is still, not calm, exactly just waiting, always waiting. Children are gathering driftwood. Some of the elders sit near the fire pit, mending nets or whittling charms. Someone starts singing an old ballad about a sea giant's wedding, and others join in softly. You feel yourself swaying without realizing it, caught in the lull of the melody. Historians still argue whether Viking songs were used primarily for entertainment, ritual, or oral history. In truth, it was probably all of the above. Music was memory, magic, and map, carried on breath and rhythm, and it helped keep your mind warm. You finish salting the last of the fish and cover the barrel with a heavy wooden lid. A neighbor waves you over to sample their first attempt at honey-fermented turnip mead. It tastes like regret, but you nod politely. That's the Viking way. You make your way back toward your longhouse, passing the drying racks one more time. The fish hangs stiff now, faces frozen in eternal surprise. The goat is there, of course, having appointed itself honorary fish guardian. It stares into the middle distance like it's solving a math problem. The cold sets in deeper as the last light disappears. You pull your cloak tighter and step back inside. The fire's been stirred, and the warm glow reaches up to kiss your aching joints. A pile of sheepskins awaits you, the closest thing to heaven a Viking fisherman can claim without dying gloriously in battle. You remove your boots slowly, because each toe feels like a separate lawsuit waiting to happen, and stretch out by the fire. You lay the Ran figurine nearby, watching the flicker of flames dance over her worn features. Maybe she's smiling. Maybe she's just judging your posture. You don't care. You've earned this. Outside, the fjord is quiet again. The waves whisper old secrets to the rocks. And somewhere, not far from your dreams, the sea breathes. Sleep doesn't come easily when you're a Viking fisherman. Even after a long day of rowing, hauling, gutting, and pretending to enjoy your neighbor's experimental root mead, your body still hums with a strange restlessness. Maybe it's the cold settling into your bones. Maybe it's the fact that your bed smells faintly of goad. Either way, you find yourself staring at the smoke hole, watching the occasional spark drift upward like a tiny, confused star. But rest is important. Tomorrow will come with new weather, new nets to repair, and possibly another eel ambush. So, with a groan and the grace of a sack of barley, you roll to your side, pull the furs close, and will yourself to sleep. It doesn't work, so you reset again. This is your ritual now, a quiet walk before sleep. It's not glamorous, but it beats. Counting card. You wrap your cloak around you, grab a hunk of salted fish from the kitchen ledge, don't ask how it ended up there, and slip outside. The village is still. The moon glows like a polished shield, lighting the world in silver. Every rooftop seems to glimmer with frost. You step carefully along the muddy path, past longhouses and stacked firewood, past the loom house where someone's left a candle burning. A dog lifts its head, gives a short woof, then goes back to sleep. Even the goat is silent, though you suspect it's watching from the shadows, taking notes. You head toward the boathouse, drawn by the whisper of water and the need to not feel quite so enclosed. The tide is in now, licking at the posts. Your fishing boat sways gently with the rhythm, bumping against the dock like it's trying to nudge you into dreaming. Mainstream fact: Viking boathouses, or nosts, were dug partially into the earth and framed with stone or timber. These structures sheltered the longboats from harsh coastal weather and allowed for quick deployment when needed. For a community like yours, where fishing is lifeblood, the boathouse is second only to the hearth in importance. You sit on the edge of the dock, letting your boots dangle just above the brine. The salt air fills your lungs again, sharper now, but somehow clean. You gnaw at the fish, it's as tough as bark, but oddly comforting. Something rustles behind you. You turn slowly, only to see your neighbor's cat strutting along the beam like it owns the village, which it probably does. You nod to it, couldn't sleep either. It blinks, then continues past you like the ghost of smugness. You look out at the water. It's dark now, with stars reflecting faintly on the surface. You swear you see a ripple too small for a boat, too large for a fish, probably just the sea stretching. Or Ran adjusting her dress. Quirky detail. Some Vikings believed the sea could change moods based on your behavior. Spitting into the waves was considered both good luck and deeply disrespectful, depending on the region. You once sneezed while casting your net, and someone suggested an entire goat sacrifice just to be safe. The boat creaks, the tide shifts, and you start to feel the weight of the day settle into your shoulders, soft and warm. You yawn, long and slow, and for once, it doesn't feel like a protest, more like a sigh of peace. Historians still argue whether Viking communities had formalized nightly routines. Some accounts speak of storytelling and communal fires. Others suggest a simple fade to silence. It's likely that routine varied by region, season, and how many fish guts you still had under your fingernails. You walk slowly back toward your longhouse, past the fire pit, now covered in ash. The flickering candle in the loom house has gone out. Even the chickens are asleep, which is rare and, frankly, suspicious. Back inside, the hearth embers glow a deep orange. Your partner's already curled up in the furs, snoring lightly. You kick off your boots, toss your cloak over a bench, and nestle yourself into the sheepskin pile. The warmth wraps around you like a familiar lullaby. As your eyes close, you hear the faint sound of waves brushing the shore, the wind rustling the turf roof above, and inevitably the soft bleat of the goat outside, who has found a way to climb onto your storage roof again. You smile. Let it stay there tonight. You'll deal with it in the morning. For now, you drift. You wake before the sun, not because of duty or even habit, but because of the rooster. That rooster, the one your neighbor swears is a sacred guardian of the dawn, but who you suspect is just loud for sport. Its shriek cuts through the village like a battle horn played badly and too close to your ear. You groan. Your partner throws a fur over their head. You both know there's no going back to sleep now. Another day begins. You sit up slowly, limbs stiff from yesterday's labor. A few joints pop like wet driftwood in a fire. You reach for your boots, still slightly damp because of course they are, and start layering up. Wool, leather, the usual anything, to keep the morning chill from your knees. A splash of cold water to your face makes you gasp. Viking skincare in 3 words: ice, air, and grit. Outside, the world is a fog-wrapped hush. Mist rolls in from the sea, turning the longhouses into dim silhouettes. You can hear movement feet on packed earth, the clatter of buckets, the creak of cartwheels being oiled. Everyone's up, everyone's busy. Except the goat, of course, who is lying in front of your door like a furry bouncer. You step over it and head toward the SMOKEHOUSE. Mainstream fact: Viking villagers relied heavily on smokehouses to preserve fish and meat. These wooden structures, often with turf roofs and slatted sides, channeled smoke from low, slow-burning fires to cure food over days. Alder, juniper, and birch were favored woods, not just for their smoke flavor, but for their abundance. You duck inside. The scent hits immediately. Sweet, sharp, slightly earthy. Smoked fish hang like trophies from rafters, stiff and brown, dripping the last of their oils into troughs below. You check the coals, adjust the airflow, and swap out a few trays. It's a quiet task, half science, half instinct, like seasoning a stew, but with fire and time. As you work, you hear voices outside, laughter mostly. You peek through the slats and see two boys trying to carry a net that's clearly larger than both of them combined. They trip, fall, untangle themselves, and try again. You smile. Every generation must learn, even if it means reenacting the same slapstick choreography every summer. Back at the longhouse, your partner is busy preparing the day's trade goods. The village relies on barter fish for wool, wool for tools, tools for honey, and honey for every excuse to make mead. You've got smoked herring, dried mussels, and one small, slightly smug eel ready to go. You pack them into a wicker basket and set off toward the market square. Quirky fact: Viking markets weren't just for goods day, were also gossip hubs, matchmaking venues, and occasional battlegrounds for poetry duels. Yes, actual insult poems, often improvised. You once witnessed a man rhymed fish gut stench with your mother's bench. It was weirdly impressive. The market is alive already. There's a man selling glass beads from the east, a woman with baskets of cloudberries, and someone who brought 4 sheep and clearly regrets it. You nod to the tanner still smells like boiled sadness, trade your fish for some linen thread, and admire a carved bone comb before deciding it's too fancy for your tangled mess of hair. Historians still argue whether Viking trade centers were centralized or seasonal. Some evidence points to permanent towns like Hiddeby and Birka. Others suggest smaller, rotating markets based on festivals or ship arrivals. In your case, it's whoever shows up near the fire pit with something worth swapping. On your way back, you stop by the elder's hut. Not out of obligation, he owes you a favor. Specifically, the return of your fishing knife, which he borrowed last winter to poke something mysterious near the latrine. You don't ask questions, you just want the knife back. He hands it over, freshly sharpened. Found this, too, he says, passing you a carved whale tooth. Might bring luck. You nod, or a curse. He shrugs. Either way, makes things interesting. Back at home, your partner raises an eyebrow at the new addition to your trinket pouch. What now? Luck tooth, you say, holding it up like a relic. They sigh. Just don't add it to the soup. You laugh, stow your treasures, and settle in to repair one of the older nets. The day unfolds slowly, threads, fish bones, sun through smoke. The village lives and breathes in its familiar rhythm, hard, quiet, and somehow deeply satisfying as the sun climbs high. You stretch your back, wash your hands, and take a seat by the fire, combing your fingers through your hair and trying not to think about that fancy comb. It wouldn't have helped much anyway. The goat ambles past with something suspiciously eel-shaped in its mouth. You choose not to investigate. The sun now hangs high over the fjord, casting bright reflections off the water and warming the sod roofs until they release the faint, earthy scent of drying moss. It's the kind of clear, vivid day that makes you briefly forget how unforgiving this place can be in winter. You sit for a while near the fire pit, mending a net with practiced fingers. The work is repetitive, sure, but in a way that soothes your mind. Not loop, tighten. Not loop, tighten. There's chatter around you. A woman nearby argues good-naturedly with her cousin about whether herring or trout makes a better stew base. A boy runs past holding a sheep skull, cackling like he's found buried treasure. The local dog well, one of them follows, close. Behind, ears bouncing like it's on a mission from the gods. You glance at the sky. It's time for the midday gathering. Not a feast. Mind you, those are for rare occasions. Today, it's something smaller, but still important. The thing, mainstream. Fact, the thing was a Norse assembly, both a legal court and a kind of town meeting. Every free man was expected to attend and voice his opinion. These gatherings helped keep order in the community and settled disputes. From property lines to stolen goats looking at you, Sigurd. You dust off your hands and walk up the hill toward the gathering place, a clearing marked by old stones and ringed with standing logs for seating. People are already taking their spots. The elder presides today, his long beard tucked into his belt like a woolen anchor. You nod to neighbors. Take your seat and listen as the issues are laid out. First up, the dispute over fishing rights at the mouth of the fjord. Two brothers argue over a particularly fruitful spot each, insisting their grandfather had clearly marked the rocks with a rune only visible when the tide's out and the light hits just right. You almost admire their creativity. Then there's a minor scandal. Someone has been stealing wood bundles from the bathhouse. You all pretend to be outraged, but secretly everyone's just impressed. The thief managed it without waking the goats. The elder bangs his staff once. Case dismissed. Quirky detail, some Viking laws had oddly specific punishments. For example, if you insulted someone in verse A, ni, and it was deemed too clever, you could be exiled for sorcery of the tongue. There are no such poems today, thankfully. Just a lot of grumbling and one impromptu wrestling match to settle a debt. Historians still argue whether Viking assemblies were purely democratic or subtly rigged by local chieftains. There's evidence for both. Records of open voting, but also sagas that hint at bribes, intimidation, or accidental boat sabotage on the way to the thing. You suspect the truth, like everything else, depends on the weather and the mood of the elder. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, the thing is winding down. A few agreements are made, some insults are thrown. A wedding is announced too. Everyone's surprise, including the bride. You shake hands, share a smoked mussel with a child who clearly stole it, and head back down the hill, back at your longhouse. Your partner has laid out a light lunch: flatbread, fish stew, a few pickled onions that make your eyes water and your ancestors weep. You eat slowly, the warmth of the stew filling the gaps the morning left behind. Then comes the oddest hour of the day, the in-between. The chores are mostly done, the evening hasn't begun, so you rest. Not a full nap, just a sprawl on the bench, eyes half-lidded, watching dust motes drift through the sunlight, like tiny lost souls looking for purpose. You toy with the carved whale tooth in your pouch. You consider giving it to your partner as a joke gift, then decide no, it's your lucky charm, and after the eel incident, you're not taking chances. The goat bleats from somewhere disturbingly close to the roof again. You ignore it outside. You hear someone calling for firewood help. You pretend you DIDN single quotes. T. Inside, your partner raises an eyebrow. If you lay there any longer, moss will grow on you. You smile. Maybe the goat will think I'm a hill and leave me alone. They laugh. Doubt it. The sun begins to drift lower. The shadows stretch long. And you, finally stand up. Time to prepare for the night again. But first, maybe another round at the smokehouse. By now, the smokehouse is warm with the steady exhale of smoldering alderwood, and the air carries that sharp, earthy perfume of cured fish and wet stone. You duck inside and check the hanging racks. The salmon fillets are coming along nicely, curling, oils dripping rhythmically into the pans below. You nudge one gently with the back of a finger. Not quite ready, but close. You crack open the vent a bit more to coax the smoke along. It's part of the dance, now just enough airflow to prevent the fire from choking, but not so much that you lose the flavor. You step back outside and blink against the changing light. The golden hue of late afternoon rolls across the village, like a warm wool blanket. Someone's lighting a fire pit down the path, and its faint snap-crackle sound drifts lazily over the rooftops. You breathe in deeply. This, here, is one of those rare in-between moments that even the sagas never bothered writing about, but maybe should have. You walk toward the water. The sea is calmer now, a gentle pulse against the shore. Nets dry on their frames like wind-rippled. Curtains, their knots catching the sunlight in tiny glints. A few other fishers are mending their lines or sharpening hooks, lost in their own rituals. Mainstream fact: fishing in Viking times was often a solitary or small group effort, with families relying heavily on personal tools, hooks carved from bone or antler, hand-twisted lines, and specialized nets suited to local waters. Deep-sea expeditions were more communal but less common for inland fjord communities. Like yours, you stop at your favorite spot on the shore, a rock smooth and flat, enough to sit on but high enough to keep your rear dry. You sit, slowly, and dangle your hand in the water. It's cold, as always, and carries the taste of salt and silt. Somewhere beneath the surface, the fish you didn't catch are probably rolling their eyes. A neighbor wanders by. He nods, then points at a tangled mess of rope you left behind yesterday. "Nice knotwork," he says, deadpan. "Very modern art." You reply without looking up. It's abstract symbolism. You wouldn't understand. Quirky fact: Viking rope making often involved twisting sheep's wool or horsehair into fine cords, which sounds ridiculous until you realize how strong it becomes after treatment. Entire boat rigging systems were built using what amounts to livestock leftovers. Someone even tried making fishing line from human hair once. It did not go well. After the ribbing and mutual mockery fade into companionable silence, you decide to prep your gear for tomorrow. You haul out your fishing basket made of birch bark strips, carefully woven, and inspect the contents. Hooks, a carved bait jar, some salt, a frayed charm that may or may not have been blessed by a half-drunk bard. You attach a fresh line to one of your older rods. It creaks a little, but holds. Like most things in your life, it's not pretty, but it's dependable. Historians still argue whether Viking fishing gear was standardized across regions or more improvised, passed down within families. Some coastal areas show consistent tool types, while others, like yours, seem to reflect the quirks of individual makers. Your grandfather once used a spoon as a lure, claimed it was divine inspiration. He also once mistook a seal for a sea spirit and ran home crying. So your trust in his innovations is cautious. As the sun begins to brush the horizon, a low horn sounds from the center of the village. Not an alarm, just the evening call. Time to gather, share food, stories, and maybe a few off-key songs. You stand, brush off your pants, and begin the walk back. Your partner is already outside, stirring a pot over the fire. You smell onions, seaweed, maybe even a little butter. They glance up. Did you check the traps? You nod. One eel looks guilty. They smirk. Better than none. Or worsen, other crab. Crabs, as you both know too well, are trouble. Last week, one managed to pinch a hole through your leather pouch. You're still not entirely convinced it didn't do it out of spite. Dinner is quiet and warm. You sip broth from a clay bowl, tear off pieces of hard bread softened by steam, and occasionally drop a bit to the dog lying nearby. You're not sure whose dog it is anymore, but it's got a better social life than most people here. You stretch your legs and listen to the sounds of the village winding down, footsteps fading, the creak of doors, the sleepy lowing of cattle, and of course, the rooster, crowing again at sunset, like it's doing performance art. Your partner glares at the horizon. I swear one day I'm putting that bird in the stew. You raise your bowl in a mock toast to dreams. You sit a little longer, watching the sky turn a deep copper. The world softens at this hour. The colors bleed into one another. The air feels thick and still, as if time itself is taking a breath. You lean back. Maybe tomorrow will be a good fishing day. Or maybe not. Either way, you'll go, because that's what you do. The first true hints of evening drift in on a breeze that carries just a whisper of the sea, and the faintest chill reminding you that the long northern summer twilight won't last forever. You push yourself up from your seat and glance around. Shadows stretch longer. The goats, for once, have stopped bleating. Somewhere, a child laughs like they've just pulled off a master prank. You instinctively check your pouch. Still there. Good. You stroll toward the Bairu animal shelter, though calling it that might be generous. It's a lopsided structure, half leaning on a stone wall and half supported by blind faith and mud. Inside, your two sheep blink at you as if to ask whether this visit means hay or evacuation. You assure them verbally, of course, that everything's fine. Mainstream fact. Viking farms, even fishing-focused ones, often kept a handful of animals, mostly for dairy and wool, sometimes meat. The buyers were usually attached to or near the longhouse, both for warmth and security. Imagine trying to sleep while your cow wanders off to become bear bait. You toss some leftover, dried seaweed and barley husks into their trough and pat the older one on the nose. She ignores you, as is her custom. Back outside, you gather a few armfuls of dry driftwood and carry it back to the longhouse hearth. The fire's embers are still glowing, and your partner throws in a few herbs as you at time, maybe some juniper. It smells like the forest met a spa and decided to stay the night. Tonight, there will be storytelling. You can already hear the neighbors gathering near the central fire ring, murmuring, laughing softly, and someone tuning what you suspect is either a harp or a very confident goose. You and your partner glance at each other. Shall we? You wrap a fur-lined cloak around your shoulders, pick up a carved stool, and head out. The fire crackles tall and bright in the center of the gathering space. Around it, familiar faces flicker in orange and gold, friends, rivals. That one guy who always falls asleep mid-sentence but insists he never snores. Someone's already deep into a saga, something about a sea serpent, a lost ring, and a bride who may or may not have been a literal bird. You can't quite follow, but that's fine. The point isn't accuracy, it's rhythm, warmth, presence, quirky detail. Viking storytelling wasn't always linear. Skald's poets often told tales in loops, tangents, and poetic flourishes, sometimes pausing mid-sentence to test the audience's memory or ask for ale. One famous saga includes a talking whale, a prophetic cheese, and a man who seduces a ghost by pretending to be a tree. Truly, bedtime was wild back then. Historians still argue whether the Norse oral tradition preserved history or just exaggerated heroic antics. Some sagas align with archaeological findings, while others veer into clear fantasy. Your guess, probably. A bit of both, and that's the charm. You sit and let the story roll over you. There's something hypnotic in the cadence, even if you don't catch every detail. The way the flames dance on the speaker's face, the occasional burst of laughter, the quiet huff of someone dozing against their spouse's shoulder, it's all part of the atmosphere. After the saga ends without warning or conclusion, as usual another neighbor takes a turn. Her tale is quieter, older. It's about a fisher who vanished in a misty fjord and returned a year later with silver hair and no memory. He never fished again, she ends, but he always knew which days the herring would run. Someone murmurs appreciation. Another adds, probably just took a long nap. You smirk into your cup of mead. Fair enough. Eventually, the fire burns lower. People begin to peel off, one by one, yawning, stretching, the odd joke exchanged over shoulder. Claps. The harpoor goose gives one last twang of protest before silence settles in. You walk slowly back home. The stars are out now, sprinkled across the ink-black sky like bits of dropped flour. The moon is thin, waning, just a ghost of itself. Behind a veil of clouds dotted the door. Your partner's already lighting the interior oil lamp. The longhouse glows with low golden light, casting shadows across the hanging tools and bundled herbs. You unlace your boots still damp and rub your sore toes. One of them may or may not be permanently offended at how much standing it endured. Today, the fire inside is steady again. Your bed, if it can be called, that is nothing more than layered furs over planks. But to your tired bones, it looks like Valhalla. Your partner hands you a mug of warm milk, spiced with something faintly sweet. No more goats on the roof. You sip, then shrug. If they're there, they've earned it. You both settle in, side by side, the quiet between you familiar and comforting. The logs pop softly in the hearth, and from outside, just for a moment, you hear the lapping of waves on stone. The world, it seems, is exhaling. Morning comes late in the far north, but the hearth coals have already cooled. You stir under the furs, reluctant to move just yet. Your joints vote no. Your stomach, however, votes louder. So you rise, stretch, and shuffle to the pot hung over. Last night's ashes, a quick rekindling with dry moss and your fire steel, and soon steam swirls into the still air again. Outside, the world is soft muffled by sea fog and the hush that always follows a gathering. Even the birds seem to be sleeping off a long night of eavesdropping. You sip your fish stew leftovers, now reborn as breakfast. It's surprisingly better the second day. Or maybe your standards have just eroded. Mainstream fact, Vikings didn't have what we'd consider breakfast food. Morning meals were often leftovers or cold meats, hard bread, or porridge made from barley or anything that could be eaten quickly before the day's labor resumed. Luxuries like eggs or milk were seasonal and tightly rationed. You wrap a cloak around your shoulders and step into the fog. The fishing traps must be checked again, if only to keep your territory marked. The eel you caught yesterday is long since stewed, and your partner has gently hinted that something less squiggly would be appreciated tonight. You pass the neighbor's paddock. The rooster glares at you. You don't break eye contact. Neither does he. This war will end one day. Down by the shore, your traps are visible only as vague dark shapes in the mist. You hop from stone to stone, avoiding the slick green ones that are, without exception, pure treachery. You reach your closest trap and bend low. Inside, one small cod, a cluster of shrimp, and something that looks like an extremely grumpy snail. You dump them into your woven basket and reset the trap, wondering if the snail could be bartered for something. Maybe a poem, quirky. Fact, in some coastal Viking settlements, children were tasked with collecting snails and shellfish as part of daily chores. One story from Greenland mentions a young boy who amassed enough limpets to trade for an entire wooden spoon, his proudest possession, allegedly, until he sat on it. As you check the next trap, you hear muffled footsteps behind you. It's your youngest sibling barefoot, of course carrying a stick that's either a walking aid or a very lazy spear. They hold it up. Look, it's magic. I named it Fork. Ah, you nod solemnly, a noble name. What does Fork do? It points at things. Does it work? They swing it vaguely, toward the water. Fish, impressive. Historians still argue whether Viking children were involved in regular adult labor or had more play-based upbringings. Some archaeological sites suggest child-sized tools and shared duties. Others propose that children were kept from the harsher work until their mid-teens. You, personally, are inclined to believe that kids like yours have always found ways to appear helpful while mostly poking things with sticks. Together, you haul the remaining traps. A few more fish. A crab that seems to know exactly how to pinch with maximum spite. Fork is used valiantly in the effort, with minimal effect. You head back uphill, the weight of the basket tugging at your arms. The mist is starting to lift now, revealing distant green slopes and the outline of another longboat moored further down the fjord. Visitors, traders. It's hard to say yet. Your sibling runs ahead, yelling that you've caught an entire army of lunch. You let them take the credit. That's what older siblings are for, doing the work so someone smaller can look like a hero. Back at home, the fish are quickly sorted, some salted for later, some gutted for the day's meal. You work efficiently, grateful for the rhythm, the motion, the ordinary repetition of something you're good at. Your partner passes behind you, humming tunelessly. The kettle bubbles. The mist burns away. Soon, the first villagers are trickling into the trading square. You recognize the distant figure of the merchant who sells ridiculously tiny spoons. You always wonder how he stays in business. Then you remember your own household has 4 of those spoons and absolutely no memory of acquiring them. You carry a few fish in a woven satchel, offerings for trade. On your way out, your sibling intercepts you again, holding Fork proudly. You need a guard. Oh, do I? Yes. I'll walk in front and point at danger. Very well, Commander Fork. Lead on. And so, like a proud procession of 2.5 humans, you set off into the mild chaos of the marketplace. Chickens scuttle. Someone sneezes into a clay bowl. A goat sits in the middle of the road and dares you to say something at the market store. You trade to cod for a small bundle of dried herbs, a sliver of wax for your boot seams, and something labeled sour cheese. You don't ask questions. You've eaten worse. A young couple is arguing gently over the price of a pair of boots, both pretending not to be in love. An old woman is bartering with the spoon merchant again. The rooster is here too, somehow, watching. You sigh, shift your basket, and grin. This is the part of the day where nothing world-changing happens, but it matters anyway. Threads of daily life stitched into the larger tapestry of the world. You tap fork gently against the side of your basket, still pointing, always. Back from the market and a little lighter in fish, but heavier in cheese, wax, and unsolicited opinions about the price of pine tar. You settle into the comforting rhythm of midday tasks. Your sibling, still wielding fork like the magical staff it very much isn't, marches off to guard the goat. You doubt the goat even notices. You, however, have more pressing concerns, namely, your net. It's still in yesterday's post-fishing condition, soggy, tangled, and with what you swear is a piece of seaweed that has developed a personality and refuses to leave. You haul the net over to your usual mending spot by the wall, where the sun hits just right, and begin your slow, deliberate repairs. Mainstream fact: Viking nets were often made from hemp, flax, or sometimes even animal sinew, and mending them was a constant chore. A single tear could mean the loss of an entire catch, so knowing how to repair a net was just as important as knowing how to cast it. Some nets were large enough to require several people to untangle, kind of like trying to unravel a dozen pairs of earbuds that had a family reunion in your pocket. You work your way through a particularly stubborn knot, muttering gentle insults at it. You've been nothing but trouble since we dragged you ashore. A neighbor ambles by with a basket of clams and an eyebrow permanently raised. Talking to the net again. Better than talking to your clam collection. Touché, you continue the work, fingers nimble, eyes half-lidded. The sun is warming your back, and the smell of salt and sage is carried on the breeze. This, right here, is one of the rare, quiet moments in a Viking's life. No axes swinging, no storm clouds brewing, just string and patience, quirky detail. Some Viking fishermen believed their nets had luck spirits woven into them, tiny guardians that could be angered by curses or neglect. It's said one man named his net Dissa and fed it beer on feast days. Dissa reportedly caught nothing but whales and trouble. A faint tune drifts down from a nearby home. Someone's playing the lyre badly, but with passion. It's hard to be annoyed when they clearly think they're the next great skald. You hum along despite yourself. Your partner steps out, shielding their eyes with one hand. You're still at that. You lift a length of net. I'm about halfway to inventing a very uncomfortable scarf. They laugh and hold up a cup. Mead, is that a question? You take a break, sipping the sweet fermented brew and letting your eyes roam the village. Smoke curls from rooftops, ducks quarrel by the stream, and a group of children are trying successfully to climb a tree that clearly has no interest in being climbed. One of them has fork. You silently pour one out for your sibling's leadership reign. Historians still argue whether Viking settlements functioned as tightly organized communities or more as loosely governed collectives. There's evidence of both. Some villages had chieftains and rigid hierarchies, while others seemed more democratic, with decisions made at the thing, a public assembly, where everyone shouted over each other in what was basically the original comments section. You finish the mead and the mending around the same time. Your net is now reasonably knot-free, if slightly sticky from some unidentifiable residue. You fold it with care and set it aside, just in time to be roped into helping with firewood. Carrying logs is a universal human experience. Viking logs, however, seem specially engineered to be awkward, spittery, and at least 20% heavier than physics should allow. You load up your arms, mutter a few choice words under your breath, nothing offensive, just strong opinions about tree bark and trudge back toward the house. You pass by the newly returned longboat, the visitors from this morning. They're traders, it turns out, bearing exotic wares, silk scraps from the east, carved bone dice, and what looks suspiciously like a Roman coin. No one asks how they got it. Everyone just nods like that's perfectly normal. Your partner is already haggling with one of the visitors over a spindle of dyed wool. You catch snippets of the exchange. I'll give you 2 salted cod and a story about a haunted oar. Make it 3 cod and the good story. What if I throw in a goat? Is it that goat, maybe? Quirky haggling was a feature of Viking trade culture. While silver was the main currency, bartering was still common, and the value of goods could swing wildly depending on local need, season, or how desperate someone was to unload a cranky goat. One recorded trade involved an axe being exchanged for a loaf of honey bread and an unusually shiny pebble. Eventually, the wool is yours. You're not entirely sure how. You just accept it, tuck it under your arm, and nod like you meant for this to happen all along. Evening is rolling in again now, soft and golden. The village smells of roasting fish, sea salt, and the faintest trace of smoke. Laughter echoes from a distant house. Someone's playing the guess what's in the pouch game. Spoiler, it's usually moss. Sometimes moss and regret. You gather your net, your wool, and your last threads of energy and return home. Your partner is already lighting the hearth again. Your sibling is asleep under a bench with fork clutched like a sword, and the goat, yes, that goat is standing on the roof, silhouetted like some kind of ancient deity. You wave. It does not wave back. Just another day in the life of a Viking fisherman. The sky dims like the wick of an oil lamp, pulling a silken twilight blanket over the fjord. Shadows stretch long and lazy across the ground as you sit on a smooth, time-worn rock just outside your home, watching the world soften. The fishing is done, the nets are mended, and your shoulders are grateful for the pause. For once, no part of you smells like eel. It's a good evening already. Dinner is a humble affair. Roasted cod, a wedge of that sour cheese that still defies classification, and a piece of yesterday's barley flatbread warmed over the coals. You eat slowly, savoring the peace. You've earned it. Your arms, your back, and your rope-it-in hands all agree. Your sibling reappears, mid-meal, hair wild, eyes sparkling with mysterious triumph. I convince the goat to leave the roof. You raise an eyebrow. How? I gave it your flatbread. You pause, look at your half-eaten piece, then look at the goat, now calmly munching nearby and clearly unbothered by your nutritional sacrifice. Fair trade. You mutter mainstream fact. Viking dinners were typically composed of whatever was available: fresh fish, preserved meats, root vegetables, dairy products like skyr or cheese, and dense flatbreads. While some wealthier households had imported spices or access to honey-sweetened dishes, most meals were functional rather than flavorful. Think survival more than cuisine. After dinner, you step into the evening air. Smoke drifts lazily from chimneys, and laughter bubbles from a neighboring house. A group is gathered near the longhouse fire pit, passing around a shared horn of mead and exchanging stories, some true, some enhanced. You wander over, drawn by the warm light and the familiar cadence of a tale being spun. Tonight's storyteller is an older woman, sharp-eyed and half-toothless, who speaks with the rhythm of someone who's told this story many times, and with escalating exaggeration. She's mid-sentence as you arrive. And that's when the sea serpent winked at me, and I knew I was either doomed or about to be married. The group howls with laughter. You settle onto a log, sip the horn when it reaches you, and let the story wash over you. The tale is part truth, part nonsense, and all comfort. These shared stories, embroidered by time and repetition, are the glue that binds this Sikhist community together. Historians still argue whether oral storytelling in Viking culture was more entertainment or education. While sagas preserve genealogies and values, many tales were likely adapted over time to include humor, local gossip, or mild embarrassment, like the story of the man who fought a wolf and lost his pants but gained a nickname as the fire crackles. Someone pulls out a bone flute and begins playing a gentle, wandering tune. It's not entirely in key, but it doesn't need to be. It drifts through the night air like the smoke, mingling with the occasional pop from the fire and the rustle of wind over thatch and turf. Your sibling tugs your sleeve. Tell a story, you blink me. Yes, the one about the invisible fish. Ah, that old classic. You clear your throat, sit a little straighter, and begin. It was a day not unlike today, when the sea was calm and the goat hadn't yet discovered its talent for climbing. You spin the tale with flair, describing a legendary fish, so stealthy it could never be seen, only heard splashing at the edges of nets, nibbling bait without leaving a trace, and whispering rude comments to fishermen who got too cocky. The crowd chuckles in all the right places, groans at your deliberately awful fish puns, and even the fire seems to flicker with amusement. Quirky fact, while there's no evidence of invisible fish legends, Norse folklore is rich with tales of sea spirits, mischievous water creatures, and fish with strange behaviors. One tale speaks of a fish that could change size depending on how hungry the fisherman was, biological marvel or a metaphor for expectation. Historians remain undecided. As the story ends and the last laugh fades into silence, the fire settles into embers. One by one, people drift away into the night, their paths lit by moonlight and familiarity. You and your sibling linger just a little longer, staring into the glowing coals. Fork lies forgotten in the grass, its magical duty complete at least for today. You finally rise, joints creaking like old ship planks. Your sibling yawns, leans into you, and you drape a warm arm around their shoulder. Tomorrow, they murmur sleepily, we should catch a dragon. I'll bring the net, you reply. You step back into your home, ducking under the lintel. The hearth still holds a whisper of warmth. Your partner is already curled under the furs, eyes closed, breathing deep. You settle beside them, pulling the covers up, listening to the hush of waves in the distance and the occasional bleat from your horned roof-climber. Outside, the stars take their posts, the fjord rests, the goat dreams of altitude, and you drift. The hush of night wraps around your home like a woolen blanket, thick and insulating. Every creak of the timber walls, every soft shift of the wind over the sod roof is as familiar as the lines in your palm. You lie on your side, one arm under your head, staring at the slowly fading firelight, its final flickers dancing on the low-beamed ceiling. But sleep doesn't come immediately, not yet. Not before the nightly routine. You ease yourself up, barefoot on the packed earth floor, careful not to disturb your partner. They're deep in the kind of sleep only those who've carried bundles of firewood uphill can know. You pull on your outer tunic, scratch at a mosquito bite that somehow found its way through 2 layers of wool, and shuffle outside. There's no true darkness in this season, just a long twilight stretching between sunset and sunrise, a kind of perpetual hush. You walk through the still village, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for temples. Every thatched roof, every lopsided fence post, every faintly squeaking cartwheel left out to sleep under the sky, all belongs, so do you, tonight. The goats are blessedly grounded. You give the rebel a side eye. It returns the gesture with what feels suspiciously like smugness. You keep walking. Mainstream fact: Vikings often rose before dawn and ended their days just after sunset, but nighttime wasn't wasted. Many used the quieter hours to carve wood, mend gear, or prepare for the next day's trade or travel. Others, especially those on night watch duties in larger settlements, patrolled the perimeter in shifts, relying on torchlight, moonlight, and muscle memory. You make a small circle around the edge of the village, checking on a few boat ropes, still tied, the communal store shed still locked, and the drying racks near the shore still upright, still vaguely fit. Everything is as it should be. Quirky tidbit: some Viking households kept protective charms by their doors runes etched into driftwood, braided hair from their favorite horse, or even carved stones believed to confuse night spirits. Your family. You've got a chicken skull nailed just above the lintel. Not for magic. Just because it looks funny and freaked out a tax collector once. Historians still argue whether Viking settlements followed formal security routines or relied more on community awareness. Some sagas describe night raids and supernatural threats, while others paint a picture of quiet, close-knit hamlets where the greatest nocturnal danger was stepping in a puddle barefoot. You head back, step slow now. Not from tiredness, though the day has been long, but from a kind of contentment that can't be rushed. There's something sacred about this peace, about knowing your world is small but complete. You duck back into the house. Inside, the fire has gone cold, but the warmth lingers in the walls. You curl under the furs once more, your partner's breathing now joined by a faint snore from your sibling, who sprawled in front of the hearth, using fork as a pillow. You smile in the dark. Tomorrow will be more of the same, casting lines, mending nets, trading salted fish for dubious cheese, enduring goat-based incidents. But that's what makes it beautiful. Viking life is not all raids and longships. Sometimes it's flatbread, fish guts, and family. Sometimes it's folding a net just right. Sometimes it's listening to an old woman describe a sea serpent with flirty tendencies. Sometimes it's just this: you let your breath slow, let your body sink, let the day, with all its salt and silliness, settle deep into your bones. And as the last thought drifts through your head, that maybe tomorrow you will be the one to tame the goat you finally let go, the fjord sighs. The stars blink. The Viking fisherman sleeps. And now, with your body resting deep in the folds of imagined furs, and your mind lulled by the rhythms of the sea and the steady hum of village life, let your breath soften. You've hauled the nets, fixed the tiers, traded fish for wool, and played your part in the great, ordinary magic of a Viking day. There were no battles, no glory-soaked sagas, just a string of small moments, warm sun on your back, fingers sticky with salt, laughter around a fire. Let those images stay with you. The gentle rock of a boat on morning waves, the smell of smoke and honey in the twilight, the creak of wooden beams above your head, strong and sheltering dot. Feel your shoulders grow heavier. Feel your jaw unclench. There's nothing else to do tonight. The world of fjords and fish, goats and ghosts can wait. It'll be there tomorrow, with all its tangled nets and quiet jokes. Right now, you are warm, you are safe. You are home, so close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the stars of the north fade behind your eyelids. Let the whispers of wind over water smooth the last sharp thoughts from your mind, and drift slowly, gently, without needing to steer. Just float. On the rhythm of a long-forgotten tide, the Viking fisherman sleeps, and now so do you.